two very exciting panels. Our president and my co-founder, Emre, is going to be moderating this one. To give a quick 20-second background, I alluded earlier to the super app kind of phenomenon that started. In Latin America, Rappi, Mobile, Glovo, all these other guys are starting to add transportation. These were formerly food delivery apps, or in some cases, gaming companies and more, banks. Everyone's starting to add this, and we've got two. In addition to that trend, there's another interesting difference, I'd say, between the European market and the American market, where the random Prius that we joked about earlier, hopping into someone's car, doesn't exist as much in Europe. People are much more collaborative, work with taxis and sometimes a dispatch system. So we've got three very interesting panelists and my co-founder, Emre. So here they are.
Great. Well, I guess it'd be great to start with just a little bit of background. We've got three very different perspectives, I think. And this morning we spent a lot of time talking about sort of more US-centric view of things, how things work in the US, notwithstanding China with Hey Cars. But I think that looking at Europe and Latin America, we see different models that can and potentially might apply in the US. So let's just start it off quickly. I think introductions would be great, and then we can look at this discussion around both how the rideshare market's a little bit different in Europe, as well as look at the emerging trend of super apps. And we've got a great set of speakers here. So, John, do you want to start? Sure.
Hello, I'm John Smith. Yes, really. And no, it's not much fun when you're trying to forge a career in business. I work for a company called Autocab. I'm a CMO. We are a software provider providing booking and dispatch tools for the taxi industry. We're based in the UK, as my accent probably shows. And we've been operating for 30 years. We process 1.2 million bookings per day. We've got a presence in 34 countries. And for today's talk, I think it's important to introduce you to IGO, where we've networked just over 400 taxi operators in the UK, combined 100,000 cars, which allows us to work with partners like Mozio, with TMCs, and with other aggregators, and we've got the supply that they need.
So, hello everybody. My name is Sasa. I'm heading up the international commercial team within FreeNow. And you will hear it very easily, also due to my accent, that I work for a German company. And we are a ride-hailing company, FreeNow, and we are part of the Now Group, which is the first joint venture between Daimler and BMW, where really two big competitors come together to maybe set up the scene if we do everything right. So we will definitely do that. And we have maybe some background on FreeNow. So we're not only ride-hailing, we're dealing with ride-hailing, but not only for taxi, but also with PHV. I think this is something which puts us in a very good position. And other verticals within the Now Group is, for example, Share Now, which the Americans, I think, better know as Car2Go. So it's a car sharing company. And except of America, we changed the name. It's not anymore Car2Go and Drive Now. Now it's Share Now. So you can hear everything is now, Free Now, Share Now. We have Reach Now, and so what was really interesting for me so far for today, and I want to take the opportunity to say thank you to Mozio for having us here, was really to hear about companies like providing, the trains or public transportation. Is Masada? I think that was the proper name, but Masabi. Sorry about that. So we have something like this in our own company. So it's called Reach Now. Or I remember a Passport looking for parking slots, for example. So again, we have something like this within our company called Park Now. And last but not least, we have Charge Now. So guess what it is? Huh? And so happy to be here. And John. It's easy for me because it's John and John. Huh?
Hi, I'm the founder of Herb. We used to call Terrobano as a Brazilian online travel agency. We focus on hotel. We are about to go global. I was in Montreal until this morning, open our office there. And we are very focused on hotel segment. And we are not becoming a super app and plugging in a lot of features. Instead, we are becoming bundled and trying to understand the behavior of the customer and deliver what he wants, not like 10,000 different features in a kind of a Craigslist of travel. So I'm happy to be here and thank you guys.
Joao, I think that's actually a great point to start. You mentioned sort of a distinction. I think it'd be great to sort of elaborate a little bit for the group here around how you think about bundled app versus a super app, because I think that distinction potentially is important, and it's important in how you think about your company and how mobility may look in different regions going forward. So would you talk about what you think?
Yeah, sure. So once we are under the instant app, bundle app, like we are able to deliver and understanding even more once the model are built what you want. So we will not offer you taxes if you are in Everest. And if you are going to France, we will not offer you translating in Mandarin. So we are able to customize like kind of instantaneously part of the apps for you, and then just erase that. So I think like for a Western world, we are not like China that we see like Meituan and think that's very, very cool, and we're gonna find that. I think time is the most important asset. So if we have like 3 steps and if we deliver what you want, so let's say that I don't know the address here, which is a point of interest, but I know the name of the event. I don't need to go to Google to find the address and to be here. We have the point of interest 2.0, which will, for this event, will end like in 1 hour. So once you can find that in one tap, that's a good deliver. So that's our way to see things.
So it sounds like you're talking about sort of dynamic personalization would be like the buzzy industry term, but dynamic personalization, reducing the amount that a traveler needs to, amount of work that a traveler needs to do to achieve whatever they're trying to do. And that's what you're trying to do with Hotel Urbano. Is that?
Yeah, we try to minimize as more as we can, but deliver the content that you want.
Yeah.
So we can do that in 2 ways. Put 2,000 features and like Meituan, or try to be more assertive.
Interesting. You mentioned like taxis in Everest, and both of your companies, John and Sasha, are doing multi-country taxi aggregation and link up, whether you're doing the actual dispatch systems, you're connecting with taxi companies in those countries. The New York taxis here have declined, and we talked about public transit as well. How have you seen the trends with taxis, in particular in Europe, but worldwide? So maybe John and then Sasha.
So the situation in the UK certainly is regulation plays a huge part. Not to say that it's any more rigorous than it is here, but if we take the city of Newcastle, for example, 300,000 population, to operate a taxi business there, you'd need to apply for and get 5 separate licenses from the various different councils. So in the case of Uber, they've got the city centre license, but that means they're only allowed to process trips that either begin, end, or go through the city centre. So there's 4 more quadrants effectively surrounding the city that they wouldn't be able to operate in, whereas our operators are private hire operators. They will set up an office and a call centre in each of those different districts, apply for the registration, and then they'll be allowed to operate in those zones. So we feel through the IGO network we've got a huge advantage. When we talk to TMCs and they genuinely want national coverage, that's what we're able to offer through the operators who work with us.
From my perspective, couldn't agree more. So maybe just I want to come back to your first part of your question as well. So regarding the app we started, as I said, ride-hailing business just with taxi. And we started in Germany as a startup company, and now a few years later, so we extended our business to different commodities. So we invented and launched PHV in Germany, for example, so the first ground transportation supplier which offers, let's say in a hybrid role, so taxi and PHV, which we felt like a bit nervous at the beginning. Yeah, so how would the taxi company industry, how would they react? And it was a bit bumpy at the beginning, right? So, but now after a few months later, so it's really running very well. But we also invested into scooters and e-bikes, for example. And but we do that, I would say, step by step. As we recognize the need in each market, we are extending the business in this market, and we don't say easily, oh, what works for Poland, for example, very well, it should work for France as well. It's not the case. As John said, in Europe, the markets are very strong regulated, and it's even more ridiculous because things I'm allowed to offer in Milan, it doesn't mean that I'm able to offer it in Rome. So even within one market, there are different regulations which we need to apply. Right?
And Sasa, talking about the sort of the Daimler group of businesses that you mentioned in the beginning, FreeNow, ShareNow, ParkNow, et cetera. As a company, how is the Now group of companies thinking about collaborating within itself, within these quite distinct and autonomous businesses themselves?
Good question, yes. Of course, we have some plans to do that, right? So we're not interested into staying in those verticals forever. Just for now, because this is the current setup of the joint venture. But however, yes, we have some plans to include maybe first car sharing into our app and to combine those use cases in one app.
Great. And then thinking about, I think it'd be interesting, bringing both the Latin American perspective as well as the European perspective. How are you seeing the emerging trends, if at all, in terms of super apps? I think David mentioned that this morning has really been driven in Asia in particular, but that trend is moving over worldwide. And even here in the US, we can think about Google being a sort of US-based super app where you can do multiple different things. How are you seeing those trends play out in Europe and Latin America, respectively?
Well, you ask a merger pro, because if someone is not the best in rebranding and merging, then it's FreeNow. As we have different markets, started as My Taxi, then we merged with Halo. I don't know whether my Irish friends are. We just talked in the break about that. We merged with Halo. We did a bad rebranding and forced them to call themselves My Taxi. Then we merged with other markets, and at the end of the day, Daimler just decided to call us FreeNow, right? So, yeah, but that's a different story. So back to your question regarding the super app, at the moment, we don't see the need in those markets where we act. We rather focus on mobility, on what we stand for. As I said, we extend our business also in the mobility sector, like scooter or e-bike or car sharing, etc. But for example, food, for now we say in Europe, stay with Deliveroo, who's doing a great job on that, but it's not part of our business so far.
And it'd be interesting, Joao, to get your perspective as a Latin American entrepreneur, how you're seeing super apps in Latin America, if at all, and where you're seeing that come from, what parts of the industry?
I think it's not in Latin America. I think overall, it's all about the time and the facility. It's not about the facility is number one issue. So I don't think we can deliver a super app with 1,000 features and make it quick. So otherwise, I think if we add features that sometimes invisible and that make the reservation and the whole journey, like the travels not start when we make the reservation. The app start when we are here. So also make all of those things easier without only with technology, like service, not charging for that. Like that's the way. So I don't think like a super app will, the way they work in China, they will work in Latin America or Europe or even in US. You see Happy tried to be a super app and they are a duck. They fly, walk, and swim, and they don't do nothing outstanding. So that's my perspective of that.
I love the analogy. Okay, so this conference conference is called Mobility and Travel. So let's talk a little bit about the travel use case, because we've talked about mobility quite a bit. How do travelers, John, access, or how does Autocab or iGo, or what's your perspective on getting taxis into the hands or enabling them to be accessed by travelers internationally, where, again, from a US perspective, we come pretty prejudiced against the taxis, given the sort of bad history, I would say, of customer experience. And I would say thanks in part to Lyft and Uber in the US, taxis have started getting their act together from a customer experience perspective, and Curb has gone quite a ways in New York to do that. But what's your perspective as far as getting those services into the hands of travelers and enabling travelers to access those services?
So a lot of our operators would be very angry for me saying that I think Uber coming to the UK was actually a really good thing, in that it really cleaned up the industry. Suddenly there was an app that worked, it was reliable, and it was very visible to see where your car was, and they were facilities that just weren't available to the UK market. Thanks to technology from companies like us, we'd like to think that taxi operators now are on equal footing, but it's really improved the perception of taxis. What we have with the network is this coverage that business travellers need. For sure, vast majority will be flying into London and spending most of their time there, but it'd be wrong to think that covers all use cases at all. So I think having a network of taxis really gives business travellers the ability to go where they want, when they want. In terms of getting into their hands, these are deals that obviously a taxi operator is never going to be able to sign on their own. But by being part of a network, we're able to partner with organisations like yourself, other strategic partners, with the TMCs, and even with corporates direct, and that's what's given them the access.
Sasha, I'd be curious to hear your perspective. Working, I associate many of the FreeNow brands with direct to consumer, whether that's My Taxi or Captain or Taxi Beat, formerly Taxi Beat, now The Beat. But how are you thinking about getting the services available via FreeNow into travelers' hands, and how are you balancing those?
Well, at least from a B2B perspective, it's similar what we heard from Lyft. So there is FreeNow and there's FreeNow for Business. And FreeNow for Business just offers a lot of more use cases for the travel industry, for the travel management. And but I think so it's we heard a lot of today about price, as we are the one, for example, who offer taxi and PHV. We made the experience that the price is not the most important thing for the travel managers and the corporates. It's more the duty of service. It's the so what's behind it. It's like the talking, for example, in Germany about, are my business travelers, are they insured when they make use of PHV, for example? How does it? Well, what's behind it, right? So they know they're used to handle it with taxis, but not with PHV. So these been the first questions which came up, and I remember a huge automotive company in Germany, asking them for, or not launching, but yeah, pre-launching and informing them about PHV, right? So, and their first reaction was, oh, that sounds cheap, isn't it? It's cheaper than taxi. And I said, yeah, good, isn't it? And then he said, yeah, for B2C, but not for corporates, right? So because when they just reflect on if something is cheap, then maybe, yeah, you provide less quality and less service than with the previous taxi solution we offered. So in a nutshell, I would say, and that's always my credo, right? So dealing with corporates is always people buy from people, right? So, and you mentioned partnerships. I think this is something which is sustainable and crucial for our business. You cannot win the markets on your own, so you need partners, and partners like TMCs, like aggregators, and also other corporates. I've heard a lot of development, for example, coming from Siemens Mobility and Philips Mobility as well. So I think we will hear a lot of stuff coming up regarding mobility, and we are talking always end-to-end mobility, which means it's airline, it's rail, it's public transportation, and of course the last mile. And yeah, so I'm very curious what will come up, right?
I'm interested in getting your perspectives here in the US. With both Lyft and Uber going public in 2019, public markets have not necessarily been kind to either of those companies. And there's been a strong push for driving profit, even as those companies continue to grow. How are you experiencing that in Europe, and how are you seeing the rideshare market change, if at all, with those pressures or not in Europe?
We've seen a very profound change since the IPO. To put it in perspective, Uber are currently in, I think, 30 cities, towns and cities in the UK. They haven't launched a new city in 4 years. And the economics don't really work for the smaller sort of tier 2, tier 3 towns and cities. So I can't imagine their expansion is going to go much beyond where it is now. It's certainly using their own drivers and the current model. So where that leaves Uber for Business, for example, is going to be very limited if they're trying to push to corporates for this national coverage.
Nothing to add from my perspective. I would say another example in Germany, dealing with public transportation, for example, we see them as partners and not as competitors. And there is one very interesting project in Germany in the city called Augsburg, which I think nobody knows if he's not German. And oh yeah, I see one hand. They run a project in Augsburg with mobility flat rate, which means all the citizens have the possibility to, I think it's around about 60 or 70 euro per month. And once you paid this amount, you have free use of ground transportation, subway, car sharing, e-bikes, scooters, etc. I think this is the right way, and that's what we support from a Now Group perspective as well.
Interesting. Before I continue, maybe I take a minute to pause for questions from the audience. So I can go on talking about this. This is what we live and breathe every day. So, but are there any questions from the audience before we keep going?
I'll throw one specifically at Sasa. You know, Daimler and BMW in the FreeNow, or I guess, are you the Now group? Or the free group? But you know, you guys have all these incredible mobility services, and a lot of them overlap. Whether it's Car2Go, you know, Movable, and public transit ticketing, FreeNow. Why has there been any push to kind of consolidate them into one place and launch kind of, you know, almost within just the Daimler services? You could almost start a mass platform exactly like what you're talking about, where people pay 70 euros a month for access to all of that. Is that something you're talking about? Is that something you've thought about? Why or why not?
Good question. Yes, so as I said, we will definitely consolidate those usabilities we offer within the Now group. So I wish it was the free group, but it's the Now group. And and being proud or proud to be part of the FreeNow organization. Why? Because our app and our technical stack will be the final app for all these usabilities within the Now group, right? So we will include as next will be the car sharing usability. So Share Now will be included into the FreeNow app, and etc. So I think it's a matter of time when we will go on with Reach Now, formal Movil, and Park Now, etc., etc. Yeah.
If there aren't any other questions, oh,
Very quick. Is here part of the free now?
I didn't get that.
Here mobility. I mean, I thought they were owned by some of your ownerships.
To be honest, I don't have a clue.
Joao, I'd like to pose a question to you. Given that you're looking at international expansion, and we're talking about mobility here, as you look to expand into different countries, literally opening a new office, congratulations, how are you thinking about offering these options, whether within your app or otherwise, to your customers who are traveling internationally?
Yeah, I think like we are not able to scale those things yet. Like I think some big companies forget about handcraft work that sometimes is the first step to big change. So let's one example. We bought a hotel in Rio de Janeiro, Nacional in Rio de Janeiro, like a very big hotel. And let's say that I need to go to the airport from here, but I need to go to the hotel before to take my stuff. So we got an autonomous car from Nuro, and my stuff will be in the airport. And like in a face recognition or a code, like I got my stuff. So I don't lose time going to the hotel, then to the airport. And that's not scale yet. Like we are offering that for less than 1% of the base. So that if we try to solve those problems, like try to decrease and increase the free amount of time of the traveler, 1% doing this, 1% doing that, and this on one scale, then we are able to offer that in different markets.
Great. I think I'd like to wrap up the panel with a question to each of you. I think we've got different variations of bullishness on super apps, and really enjoyed the panel on the z-axis earlier today. So I'd like your predictions for 2030 as we look at, in 2020 today. 10 years from now, we talked about EVTOL. Are you more bullish on EVTOL or super apps in 2030?
I think super apps. Probably Google or Uber in the UK, in Europe.
I'm not allowed to agree with you, John. So, as we are working on an own super app, so maybe I think if we, as I said, if we do everything in the right way, and there are some other plans within Daimler and BMW which are not for public ears, I think that we will be able to steer the mobility market into the right direction and to extend our own app maybe to a super app. Let's see.
Actually, I think like we need to super apps like is aggregate a lot of things with the same infrastructure. So I think now we just knew a company that will process like 1 petabyte per second, and that's changed the whole infrastructure, not in our industry, but in image for cancer prediction industry. But 2-3 years from now, that will impact us. So, what's the purpose to aggregate 100 guys with they run 100 miles per hour? If 3 years from now we can have one guy who run 1 million miles per hour, so I don't even have idea what was going to happen, but it's going to be all driven by the infrastructure and the technology, and it's not by our thoughts.
Quite a note to end on. So thank you all, really interesting perspectives, and appreciate you taking part in this panel.